acceptability of qualitative research is not very great, right? So, and there is a lot of uh, you know misconception about qualitative research, uh, and also the utility, and lot of words people talk about, subjectivity. But I always say that, if you want to really understand the research, you need to understand first the depth of qualitative research. And to understand qualitative research, it's very, very important for anybody to understand the two backbone of qualitative research, and that is research methodology and research design. And the software is concerned, software plays only 15 to 20% role in analysis of your data and presenting your data in various mode. So software is only software, unlike in quantitative research, where software plays, I think, more than 75% of role is played by software. But in qualitative research, the most of the thing is done by researcher, especially understanding the literature, uh, data collection, and especially researchers face a lot of difficulties and challenges while collecting the data, because collection of data, especially in field-based, it invites a lot of challenges. How to write to your respondent, how to get access to these people, how to get real information, what are the different ethics involved in collection of all those data. So I always say that, in qualitative research, we need to be very, very clear about the process of collecting data, especially when you are going to collect data from the field-based research. If you are going to have qualitative content analysis, which is purely based on literature and not the primary data, then you might not face a lot of ethical issues. But especially when you are going to collect data either from organization or social setup or any setup, when you're going to meet people, you need to be very, very sensitive towards people and organization you collect data from. So, and I have seen that during my workshop, I have seen that many people, those who conduct qualitative research, they're actually not aware about the ethical concern. And the fact is that ethical concern is not a kind of thumb rule. It's a kind of, guidelines, and it keeps on changing upon situation to situation, right? I always say that it's not about the binary like yes or no. No, it purely depends on the context. And I always ask question about whenever you are going to ask ethical question about the way you collect your data. So you always need to ask fundamental question to yourself, whether all these ethical consideration compromises the quality of data. If answer is yes, then you need to change your strategy of collection of data and using your ethical consideration, because ethical consideration what is used in one organization may not be suitable for another organization. Of course, there are a lot of ethical issues, and why I say this ethics, because qualitative researchers engage into a lot of ethnographic studies, lot of social sensitive research, lot of research related to social stigma, and lot of sensitive issues across discipline. And in qualitative research, it's not only one kind of data that you collect. You collect usually two sets of data that I will discuss in my workshop. And I always ask question about how many types of data do you collect. Then people get confused that, oh, what data? So they feel that data is all about what you ask question and what people have answered to you. That's the data, but the bigger data is what you capture from your senses, what you see, what you hear, what you create some kind of intuition out of this. And when you go and read literature, there's a lot of discussion given on field note part. But when you try to practice how you can translate all those field note into analysis part, perhaps literature is also very silent. So whenever I'm going to take a workshop next time, so definitely I'm going to give you some blueprint about how you can use all those field notes translating into your analysis part. So I always say that machine plays only limited role. However, it is very useful to produce a lot of result which can be shown by using a lot of numerical interpretation. Many people feel that qualitative research is without numbers. It's not true. Qualitative research does have a lot of numbers. Only the difference is the interpretation of all those numbers are very, very different from the interpretation of quantitative research. And also we need to also, break and delayer a lot of biases that we have in our mind. For example, a lot of people say that quality is subjective, right? But they fail to understand that this subjectivity is the beauty of qualitative research. And people think it differently. That subjectivity, people think that it's not, taken into good connotation. So I always say that subjectivity is one essential characteristics of the qualitative research, and we should be appreciative about it. Just like, personality, many people feel that, oh, I'm introvert, right? Some people feel that, oh, I'm extrovert. So people feel very happy about being extrovert, and some people feel very discouraged about being introvert. So since I also teach HR, so I always say people that no, this is a unique dimension and you should feel proud of it. So just like in qualitative and quantitative research, both have different dimensions. So, and both go together, right? So both complement and supplement each other. So any effort or any approach or any intention to increase the value of one research over other is a flawed assumption. It's half truth. It's not reality. So I've seen many people coming from different reputed institutions, very fond of numbers. So during my, PhD in TIS, people used to come, and especially when there was a, qualitative research presentation, they used to say that, oh, there are no numbers, right? So there was only one question. So this question gives you a lot of insights and idea about whether you can justify everything by numbers, your sentiment, your emotions, your expressions, your feeling. And that is where the answer lies in qualitative research. So, right, I'll stop here, and rest of, I've given you some clue about, so basic background about qualitative research. So when my session starts, definitely I'm going to deep down more about qualitative research and also the data analysis. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, sir, for such an insightful talk on this qualitative research. Now I have the pleasure of introducing Miss Aditi Bhardwaj. She will be the person who will be leading today's workshop session. Ms. Bhardwaj is an assistant professor at the esteemed Tata Institute of Social Sciences with an academic background in economics from the University of Delhi and advanced training in development studies from TIS itself. She completed her master's and MPhil at Tata Institute for Social Sciences. Her work has a strong focus on field-based, policy-oriented, and community-led research. She has also been a part of the Human Rights and Democratization Exchange Program at the University of Sydney. She has contributed to many internationally recognized work, recently including a brief with the Forest Peoples Program, which examines how indigenous people and local communities can lead the monitoring and evaluation of social impacts of conservation, which emphasizes participatory methodologies, ground evidence, and including policy outcomes, everything that a qualitative researcher must know very well. So we are very delighted to have her to guide us through this session. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much for that introduction. And I'd want to thank ResearchWise for calling me to be a part of this workshop. It's always fantastic to engage with so many people, and especially when they're coming from such diverse backgrounds. So thank you so much for that. And also thank you to Professor Gupta. He's really set the stage for me. So at least just summarize my entire 2 hours of session into his 5 minutes of introductory speech. So thank you so much, sir. And we look forward to your sessions as well.
Thank you
But I
very much.
think, yes, I think I'll just share my screen now. Okay. Is this visible? Yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Ma'am, before the session starts, I just want to make a few rules clear for everyone in the session. Please do not open your mics in between of the session so you don't face any interruption to all the participants. If you have any doubts, we can ask them at the end. You can put them in the text box. If you have any urgent doubt, please raise your hand, and ma'am will let you know as per her convenience. You can keep your cameras on. That creates a more engaging impact over the session. The rest is on your own belief. So that's all. Thank you, guys. Hopefully you will have a great session.
Yes, thank you so much. And I definitely want to see some cameras open. It's nice to have an engaging session. And please feel free to ask questions. But yes, I feel if you ask the questions towards the end of the session, it'll be better. I can finish with my uh, portion here, and then we can probably have some discussion. All right, I think I'll start now. And as has already been introduced, I'm Aditi, and I'm currently an assistant professor at the School of Development Studies at Tata Institute of Social Sciences. And I largely work on issues of conservation and landscape studies, political ecology, and also traditional and indigenous knowledge systems. I also teach basic and advanced qualitative research methods along with economic sociology and anthropology of development. Now, for this workshop, what we will be doing over the next 3 sessions with me, and of course, then Sir comes in with the subsequent 2 sessions. But for the first 3 sessions, we will learn, of course, about qualitative research methods, beginning with some basic concepts about research, also focusing on some philosophical foundations because I realize that we have a lot of scholars and master students in this group. So for those who would be taking up research subsequently or are exploring opportunities in academics, I think it's good to know a little bit about philosophical foundations of research itself. And then I think I'll move, for today's session, I'll move into the differences, more textbookish differences in quantitative and qualitative research. And then from tomorrow, we'll dive into specific research methods. And then, of course, Sir comes up with analysis. All right, now, okay. This, I guess, is not moving. Just hold on. Let me try again. Yeah, so this is working, right? Yeah, all right. Okay, so let's dive in. And, when we start, one of the first questions that I want to ask all of you, and I'll be happy if some of you actually answer, is what is research? What do you understand by research? Some of you can please share your thoughts. What do you think research is? And please don't hesitate. Please feel free to answer. Yes.
Ma'am, hello, Dr. Ravikant here.
Hello.
Ma'am, I'm pursuing my master's from Indian Institute of Public Health, Delhi.
Okay.
Ma'am, I think research is the systematic investigation of something that we need.
All right. So it's a systematic investigation, correct? Anybody else? Any thoughts? What do you feel? What do you think research is? And what do you do in research?
Hi, ma'am. This is Dr. Naved Alam from Bangalore. So, in my opinion, research is something to that finding an answer for a gap that was that was remaining, and look for something again which was not answered previously.
All right. All right. So you're basically trying to identify gaps in existing research and then try to fill those gaps with your research, right?
Right. Yes.
All right. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. So I see some answers on the chat box as well. Scientific systematic study. See, all of these things that you're saying are absolutely correct. And, if you have to put research into a definition, then it's basically a conscious activity, which is trying to methodologically know something about the world around us, right? Or about a phenomenon, right? So research, very simply, is organized curiosity. You want to know something, but it's in a very organized and very systematic fashion that you try to go about it. Now, couple of features of research that, and scientific research per se, that we should keep in mind is one, that it's a conscious activity. Now, when I say it's a conscious activity, it basically means that it's driven by a purpose. It's driven by an intent. And those intent and purposes are reflective in our research questions, right? So the first thing in research that we all do is to have a research question. The second important feature of research is that it is systematic. That means that there is a systematic process of chronology that is followed in research, right? Now, this basically means that any scientific research is methodologically rigorous, right? So there is an entire process, there is standards that are set based on which you go about identifying your research questions and then subsequently answering those questions through your data collection and analysis. And lastly, as of course, some of you also said, that the idea is really to know about the world around us, right? To get more information where there is a lack, where there is a gap in existing literature. So we're trying to come out with results or trying to understand something better. Now, all of these features of research is what accords its scientific validity, right? That means it makes research scientific. Now, a lot of things that we do in our everyday lives may seem like we're following a process of research, but that is not scientific. So for instance, I might want to understand, which restaurant am I going to go and have dinner today. So I might do a quick Google search, right? Or I might call up a couple of friends and ask, okay, so which is a good restaurant here in town? And they might give me some suggestions. I might look at the reviews of the particular restaurant on Google, and then I arrive at a decision that, okay, this is where I'm going today. Now, if you look at it, I am following the process of having a question in mind. I'm trying to identify data, get data, and then analyze that data. But that's not scientific, right? Because we lack methodological rigor in these everyday activities. So a lot of everyday activities do look like research, but not necessarily are they scientific research. I hope this is clear. Great. All right. Now, how do you go about doing research, right? Now, if you look at this illustration here, you have this young boy here, and he has this question in mind, which is, can I, without any help, throw one of these rocks into the pond? So this is a question that's there in his mind. And in order to find out if he can do it or not, he calls up on his friends and says that, I'm going to throw this rock so hard you won't believe it. He tries maybe once, maybe fails, tries another time, maybe fails, and probably the third or the fourth time, with all his force, he throws the rock and finally is able to achieve what he wanted, right? And based on that, he says, I rock so fully. And finally, he announces that he's done what he wanted to, that he was able to successfully throw this rock. And there's this person standing behind him and says, I can also do that. If he can do it with the same techniques, with the same force, probably I'm also able to do the same thing. Now, research is something of this sort, right? So you usually begin with a research question in your mind. Now, in order to answer that research question, you need information. For that, you initially would generally say that you formulate hypothesis, and then you go to your field or you conduct experiments in order to collect data, right? Once you've collected data, you will analyze that data and draw conclusions. Now, once those conclusions are drawn, we generally publish all of these conclusions in different formats, right? So for a lot of students, they would have their theses published, right? Some of us write journal articles. Some of us who are working in, say, suppose, certain organizations would have reports published. So basically, we publish our literature, our data and conclusions in some format or the other. And the beauty of research is that once you have done this research, largely it is understood that this is replicable, that somebody following the same technique, the same methods, should be able to arrive at the same conclusions. Now, that's traditionally how research has been. We've traversed a long, long path away from this understanding. Traditionally, that's the structure of research. Now, in all of this, there's one element which is very, very crucial, which is your methodology, right? Now, what is the role of methodology? Now, methodology is critical for any research that you do, and any sort of methodology that you apply is useful or is critical, not just because it is leading your research questions to answers, but because it is leading you to answers in a systematic, in a rigorous, in a more scientific manner, right? And that's what distinguish our work from everyday activities, right? So methodology is a very, very crucial element. I hope this is also clear, right? Now, before we get into quantitative and qualitative research method differences, I thought it'd be nice to take a step back and to talk a little bit about some philosophical foundations of research, which all of us have, which all of us, some stand or the other, we usually take, but it's just that we never explicitly say it, right? And this becomes important for any researcher, specifically for scholars who are pursuing academic research. Now, very often when I ask my students that what would they like to do in their research, what is that area which interests them, they come up with these answers and say that, I think I want to do an ethnographic study. Or somebody would say, I'm going to do a study which uses in-depth interviews, or I'm going to do oral histories. And I tell them that's not the way that research works. Why? Because your methodology is decided based on your research questions. And your research questions are reflective of underlying philosophical positions that we take. Knowingly or unknowingly, there are positions that we take. And these positions are determined by what is called as ontology and epistemology in research. Now, just to share a quick anecdote, I was once traveling for an international workshop in Italy. And this was based on conservation science and the impact of conservation on communities and how far indigenous and local people's perspectives are getting recognized in conservation. And after this long week of brainstorming and writing papers, we finally went out for a city tour, where the city tour guide asks us, so what do you guys work on? And we explained that we are basically working in the domain of conservation and social science, and that we are basically social scientists. And she immediately responded by saying, oh, so you're not real scientists. We were quite taken aback by that statement, that, after having worked so hard for a week and trying to, produce some results, somebody's telling you that you're not real scientists. But if you think of it, at the heart of this statement is something that has been known to all of us for very, very long. And that is the different ontological and epistemological positions that different researchers take, right? More categorically, the differences in ontology and epistemology between natural science research and social science research. And I'm sure a lot of you would be aware of this, that unfortunately, social science for a very, very long time, I would request you please mute your mic.
Please, mute yourself.
Okay,
Yeah,
all
ma'am,
right.
continue.
Somebody is having a wonderful Saturday evening.
Sure.
Yes, all right. Okay. Of course, why would they be interested in ontology and epistemology? But anyway, let's carry on. So at the heart of this debate between, the priority or the superiority of which science is better, we are quite aware of this fact that social science for a very, very long time has been understood as the inferior or secondary science, right? And that's precisely because of the kind of ontological and epistemological positions that we take. Now, what is this very interesting words, ontology and epistemology? Now, I'll quickly read it out from the slides first. Now, if you look at ontology, ontology is basically an area of philosophy that deals with the nature of being or what exists, right? That is an area of philosophy that asks what really is and what fundamental categories of reality are. And epistemology is that area of philosophy concerned with creation of knowledge. That is, it focuses on how we know what we know and what are the most valid ways of reaching truth. Now, to put it more simply, ontology is basically what you consider as being real, right? And there are two positions largely in ontology. One is that of a realist. Now, realist basically says that the reality is always out there, that it exists independent of how I see it, independent of how I perceive it, independent of how I think of it, right? That's like basically saying that, you know, even before Columbus discovered America, America already existed. It was always there. It's not as if, you know, Columbus created America. It was always there. The reality was existing. It was always there. Now, this is a position that is very close to the natural sciences, specifically because natural sciences deals with subject matters that align with this. So, you know, you'd study rocks, for instance, you'd study different formations, you'd study different elements, right? All of these align closely to such an ontological position. The second position is that of a nominalist. A nominalist says that there is no reality out there. Reality is always constructed, right? And it's constructed by us. We give meaning to what we perceive as real. Now, based on which positions that we take ontologically, our epistemological positions get decided, right? And epistemology, as I said, is how do you know about something? How do you study something? How do you learn? How do you gain knowledge about something, right? Now, I know these are very overwhelming words and you know, philosophical foundations, but let's just take one example and maybe it becomes a little more clear. Now, say somebody is fallen ill, right? Somebody has fever, for instance, or if there's any other medical issue. A realist would argue that it's a biological problem, right? So there is some virus, some bacteria, something that has attacked your system, and or maybe some genetic issue that is there, and therefore, say, suppose you have, you know, a symptom of fever. Now, that's a very real phenomena. It's a very real biological phenomena, which can be seen, which can be measured, which can be observed. A nominalist, on the other hand, would say that probably not, right? They can come up with a different understanding of the same issue and say that, you know, probably you have fever or you are unwell because, you know, the gods are very angry with you, or your ancestral spirits are angry with you, you've done something wrong. Or the vital forces in your body are in imbalance, or somebody's casted a negative, you know, spell, evil spell on you. Now, these are different ways of looking at the same issue, illness, right? But our understanding of what counts as real is different. In one case, it's a biological issue. In the other case, we are attributing this to, you know, say, suppose our ancestral spirits not being very happy with us. Now, these are different ontological positions. Now, once we've decided what our position is, whether the first or the second, our epistemological position gets decided, which means the way we will know more about this, the way we will gain information about this reality becomes clearer. Now, in the first case, because it's a biological problem, because it's, you know, a pathogen is attacked, thus, for instance, in order to know what exactly is wrong with my body, what do you think I'll do? What do you think in such a case, what is the, you know, line of action? Anybody?
Visiting doctor.
Exactly. So I'll visit a doctor. He will prescribe me, you know, some tests. So bolenge CBC kar lo, you know, do LFT, KFT, whatnot. So you'll do some blood tests. You'll do some other pathological tests, right? In order to identify what exactly is the issue with your body, and the remedies that follow are also along the same line, right? So they'll prescribe you some medicines, some allopathic medicine, some antibiotics, for instance, will be prescribed. Now, this is in the first position. In the second position, when I'm thinking that, okay, you know, this illness is not because of any pathogen attacking me, it's precisely because, you know, my stars are not aligned properly, or, you know, somebody's casted an evil spell on me, or probably that my ancestors are very angry with me. What is the line of action now? How do I know what exactly is wrong? Who do I go to?
Jyotish.
Anybody? Exactly. Right. So one of the persons that I can probably seek advice from is an astrologer, right? I might actually, in my specific different cultures, would have different people that I can approach, and they will tell me what exactly is wrong. And the prescriptions would also follow accordingly. They'll ask me to do some remedies, some, you know, sacrifice, maybe do some rituals, etc. Now, and this is I'm not making this up. I'm sure everybody here would be very well versed with the fact that this is true for so many communities in India and of course globally as well. Right? Now both these positions exist. Right here, right now, they exist. And we as researchers cannot say that one is superior to the other. However, the way science has developed, right, historically, if you study history of science, you would understand that ontology and epistemology, form the basis of the most bitter quarrels in social sciences, right? And each side claims that they know the best, that their ways and their means of understanding reality are far superior, and everything else, any other position that is taken, is at best misguided, right? So a lot of scientists would say that, if you're approaching an astrologer for remedies, then it's just superstition, it's nothing else, right? Now, and that's what forms the basis of debate in social sciences, or generally in terms of which science is valid and which science is not valid, right? Okay, now, this is again stuck. All right, yes. Now, moving on, this debate on ontology and epistemology, if it is clear, I can understand it's a little difficult to digest, but nevertheless, if you've just got a little bit of understanding also, this leads us to a discussion on the different approaches that exist in research. And for paucity of time, I will not get into details of any of these approaches, but broadly we can say that there are three approaches in social sciences. The first is called the positivist social science. Now, positivist social science is the earliest approach on social sciences, and it builds on a realist ontology. Realist ontology was that reality is out there, it exists independent of how I perceive it, right? And many of our initial social sciences works tried to mirror methods of natural sciences. Why? In order to gain legitimacy. In order to be accepted as scientific, we mirrored or we used methods of natural sciences. And positivist, social sciences aligns with those realist ontologies, right? And therefore, if you look at positivist social science, the focus has largely been on, believing that reality or social reality is pre-existing, that it is objective, it's measurable, and it's universal, right? So everything is the same everywhere. So you have causal laws that can be applied at any point of time in any place, right? And naturally, the methods are also along those lines. So you would have more quantitative surveys, more standardized methods of doing research. The interpretivist social science came as a response to the positivists. Okay? And it says that, in social sciences, we are not dealing with rocks and insects, right? We are not looking at people under microscope. And therefore, the reality is not out there. It is not the same everywhere, right? And you cannot understand the reality or measure it very accurately or precisely. In social sciences, we're dealing with human beings and human systems, right? And naturally, because you're dealing with humans, these human systems are complex. They're different in different places. They're different in different cultures, and they are constructed, right? So it is people who give or attach meaning and interpretation to things around them, as in case of illness, right? Now, naturally, then the interpretativists have said the focus, therefore, should not be on objective measurement, but on capturing these meanings, these worldviews, these individual experiences of people, right? That is the lived experiences, the lived meanings that people attach to things around them. The third is the critical social science, and critical social science is basically came as a response to both the positivists and the interpretivists, and it takes from both the approaches, but it also departs from them. Now, critical social science argues that the purpose of research should neither solely be on objective empirical observation and measurement of reality, nor should it just look at the subjective interpretations and meanings people attach to things around them. But what research should be about is about bringing a positive change, bringing about a transformation by critiquing the existing conditions, by critiquing the existing situation. And therefore, critical social science looks at, issues of power, inequality, structural issues, right? Now, we can take this up in more detail later, but if you look at the table here, you might get some more idea in terms of examples, right? So if there is a migration study, right, a positivist would be interested in understanding what are the patterns, what are the numbers, how many people migrate, what are the push and pull factors for migration, right? An interpretivist, on the other hand, would be interested in understanding the experiences. What do people go through? What is an experience of migration like, right? What does it mean to be a migrant? A critical social science researcher would focus on power structures and how they influence migration, right? And how do migrants either resist it or how do they navigate these structures of power? Similarly, if you want to study, say, suppose, school dropouts, right? So positivists would focus on why do students, drop out, or what are the variables that can help me understand this dropout. Interpretivists, as I said, they're focusing on experiences, and therefore they would want to know what are the experiences that make schooling alienating, right? What does it feel like to drop out from school? Critical, because they're focusing on structures, they would want to understand how structures such as the caste or class or gender, how do they lead people to drop out? What role do these structures have in issues such as school dropouts? I hope this is clear. You've got some understanding at least, because then I can move on to the next section. All right. Okay, all right. I see a lot of thumbs up. Great, thank you. All right, now I would now want to move away from these foundational aspects of research and see, once you understand epistemology and ontology and the different approaches, I feel it's important, even if you're not in academics, I feel it's important because it helps you understand what position or what approach or what side you're coming in from, right? How do you perceive things, which as researchers is very crucial for us, right? Now, moving on to a quick discussion on quantitative and qualitative methodologies. Here is an illustration that I find very interesting. This is a bridge usability test, right? And there is a half constructed bridge here. And a participant is asked to drive through this bridge in order for an investigator to assess the usability of this bridge. And naturally, this person, he drives through the bridge, which is of course half constructed, falls off the bridge, meets with an accident. And now, after this investigator is wanting to understand the experience of this person, right? Now, this investigator says to the participant who's just met with an accident that on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your bridge experience? Naturally, frustrated, this person's, is just explode. He starts shouting and he says, I almost died. My car exploded into a pile of flaming dust. I can't feel my legs. I have a chip lodged in my nostril and my car insurance is going to go up and my wife is going to divorce me and goes on. Right? He's really frustrated and he's letting out, telling this person what he's feeling right now. But the investigator, says, okay, but, still on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you want to rate it? Realizing that, he's talking probably to a wall who's not registering what this person is saying. Frustrated, he says, I'll give it a 1, and he leaves. To which the investigator says, well, that's just one test and it's not even statistically significant. Now, what, according to you, is the problem here, if at all there is a problem? I'd like to hear from all of you. Okay, approach. It would be nice if some of you can actually, speak in the mic also. What is the issue here? What do you think is wrong? Of course, approach is a problem. Anything else?
Ma'am, I think methodology would be the
Correct, methodology. All right. Anything particular in methodology?
We are trying to quantify the experience.
Okay, all right. Yes. You're all right, actually. See, one of the immediate issues that becomes visible here is the fact that this particular method that you're trying to use in order to assess the usability of this bridge is that it's quite rigid, right? It's not able to capture a lot of detail. The other issue to my mind is that, you know, how, when, say, suppose somebody is given a rank or a number 1, right? Somebody else might give it 2 or 3, right? Now, except for knowing that 2 is greater than 1 or more than 1, what exactly is different between 2 and 1, right? If it's good, what exactly is better? And that's the second problem. The third and the most crucial aspect, as a lot of you mentioned here, is that very important information is missed. The experience of this person is actually not captured in my current system of assessing, right? In fact, this person did make an attempt to explain what the experience of using this bridge was. He did shout and he told what all is going to happen. Unfortunately, my research method is such that it is not able to accommodate for this information. At best, all of this is peripheral noise. This is not data, according to the current scenario, right? And therefore, as you know, Einstein has also said that not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted, right? And that leads us to the difference between quantitative and qualitative approaches. Now, when you look at quantitative approaches, quantitative has largely been a method of aggregation, right? So what do you usually do? And I have very limited understanding of quantitative, so please excuse me if I'm wrong. But from my understanding, when you look at quantitative approaches, you usually take a sample, a representative sample, and then treat everybody in that sample equally, such that you can generalize the results from this sample to the larger population, right? Now, for example, if you look at the illustration here, all animals in this sample are treated equally or treated at par and assessed against one benchmark, which is to climb the tree. In reality, that is not possible. This is something all of us know, right? Different animals have different skill sets here, and therefore, it is slightly problematic. If you extrapolate this to people, in reality, people are also quite different, right? We all have very different histories. We all have very different socioeconomic backgrounds, different contexts. Our conditions and experiences in life are very different. And therefore, a method of aggregation where everybody is treated the same tends to miss on these very unique experiences, right? On the other hand, if you look at the qualitative research, largely qualitative has been a method which is a method of disaggregation, breaking down, rupturing, and looking at finer details, right? And it believes that everyone is uniquely located, right? And because it believes so, it focuses on those unique aspects, which is people's experiences, their views, their opinions, their perceptions, etc. And that's why we say qualitative research is objective, right? Now, a qualitative research then naturally argues that reality is based on where we are located in a social setup. As in case of this illustration, there are these different blindfolded people who are touching different parts of the elephant, right? And based on which part they are touching, they are arriving at different conclusions. So if somebody is touching the body, it's saying, you know, it's a wall. If somebody is touching the trunk, it's saying it's a snake. Somebody is touching the ears, it's saying it's a fan. Somebody's touching the tail, it says it's a rope. Now, that basically means all of these people are perceiving this elephant differently based on where they are standing, where they are located, which is true for human beings as well, right? Now, that means that my history as a person, my history, my social status, the social categories that I belong to, the place that I live in, the time that I live in, my experiences in life, everything will determine how I understand reality, what my perception of reality is, right? I hope this much is clear. All right, great. Okay, now if this is clear, I also want to quickly get into some textbookish differences between quantitative and qualitative research, right? Now, The first major difference between quant and qual is that quantitative is largely understood as being about numbers, whereas qualitative focuses more on words, stories, or narratives, right? Now, my teacher in this, gives this very interesting example to demonstrate this difference. Now, for instance, if you have to go from place A to place B, and you ask somebody for directions, usually from a quantitative point of view, somebody would tell me, go straight for 1 kilometer and then turn right, walk another 200 meters, and you'll reach your destination. It's like your Google Maps, right? But if you ask a qualitative researcher, how do I go from point A to point B, or where is this place? This person will give you so much more information, so many stories, so many anecdotes along the way, right? So this person will probably tell you that, okay, you go straight, you'll see this line of street foods, and you get the best tikkis and samosas of the city here, right? And right in the corner, you'll also see a, eatery, a Parsi eatery, and it's 90 years old, and it's just been the same. It's a small shop, but it's been the same. It's always been like this. There's no change. And from there, I think you can turn right and you'll see a mall. Now, this mall has just come up in the last 2 years. Earlier, this place had a children's park. If you keep going straight for another 2 minutes, you'll reach your destination. Now, what happens is very often we feel that all of this additional information that somebody has given us is chit-chat, right? Or it's just small talk. It's just extra superfluous information that has been given to us. However, what we fail to realize is that much of life is happening in the small talk, right? Life unfolds in the small talk. What this person then has done is given us so much information about the past, the present, and what the future looks like of this particular place that I am in, the culture of this place, who are the people inhabiting this area, what are the infrastructures here, what are the changes that are happening in this area in that small talk, right? Therefore, words are basically adding flavor, right? They're adding flavor to life. That's why qualitative research focuses on that flavor. The second major difference is that one, quantitative research is from the point of view of the researcher, whereas qualitative research is from the point of view of the participants. Now, what does that mean? When we just find from the point of view of the researcher, it basically means that quantitative research is largely controlled or driven by researchers. Us, all of us would be doing research, right? We decide what research has to be done. We decide what questions have to be asked. And very often we also pre-code answers, like in a survey, right? On the other hand, for qualitative, the participants here lead discussions. Your research subjects will be given the floor to talk about what they want to talk about and share their experiences, right? And therefore, you would have very often heard that qualitative research also brings out the insider perspective, the participant's point of view. So you're in qualitative research trying to understand a phenomena, an event, or something from the point of view of the people that you're studying. The third difference is that in quantitative, the researcher is distant, whereas in qualitative, the researcher is close. Now, what does that mean? When we say the researcher is distant, this is drawn from the natural sciences, right? This is closer to the natural sciences method, where in order to maintain objectivity, it is believed that the researcher has to keep a distance, or the fact that the researcher will not have any impact on the research process. Just opposite of that is in qualitative, the researcher is part and parcel. We are part and parcel of the entire process of research. Our presence decides the trajectory of our research. And it is also a very intimate process where us as participants, us as researchers and participants share about our lives, our experiences, our emotions with each other, right? Now, one is also theory testing. The quantitative method is also theory testing, which is also called as deductive, right? So we test existing theories by formulating hypotheses and then collecting data to check whether the hypothesis is correct or not. In qualitative, it's the other way around. It's inductive, right? So we build theory based on our field data, right? Similarly, one is structured, the other is largely unstructured and open-ended. One is about generalization. I've already talked about this. The other one is very context specific. One relies on hard data, the other focuses on very rich, in-depth data. One is about macro studies, Qual is about micro studies. One focuses on behavior, what do people do? The other focuses on meanings, right? So why do people behave the way they do? We're trying to understand the inner layers of people's behavior. One is in artificial settings and the other is in natural settings. Now, please remember that these are textbookish differences. And also, please remember, as Professor Gupta has also mentioned in the beginning, that qualitative does not mean not quantitative, right? These are not polar opposites. It's just that these are two different methodologies which are rooted in two different philosophical traditions. There is no competition. They have their own pros and cons, and they are useful in different contexts. Now, moving forward, if you look at qualitative research, the easiest way, if you want to understand qualitative research in more depth, is by understanding what do qualitative researchers do differently, right? And for that, there are a couple of features that we must understand. The first is that qualitative research is carried out in real life settings. Now, I'm sure very often all of you would have heard of this term called fieldwork, right? Now, this tradition of fieldwork comes from the discipline of anthropology, wherein anthropologists would physically travel to different places in order to study the so-called exotic communities. But the idea behind fieldwork is basically to be able to understand and capture the everyday life of people. What do people do in their everyday lives? How do they go about their everyday lives? Right? So we're trying to understand and capture this everyday life in their natural settings, in their homes, in their natural habitat, such that what we are able to capture, what we observe, is closest to reality. Now, why do I say that it's closest to reality? Now, the reason being, because when people are in their natural habitats, when they're in the natural settings, they are free from inhibitions, right? They will be as they are, as they truly are, right? That means least artificial. And therefore, the results or the observations that you capture will be least biased, right? Imagine, say, suppose, on the other hand, if I want to understand some culture and I happen to speak to somebody, a particular person from this culture, and I tell this, can you please come over to my office and, I want to interview you. That is basically, I'm removing this person from their natural setting into my habitat, right? Now, what that does is I've already made this person very conscious. You already removed this person from their natural environment. And therefore, this impacts the answers, the discussions that you will have. The person is already very conscious, very alert about why this person is there, what are they doing, what are you doing, why are you asking these questions, etc. Therefore, in order to truly know, say, about a particular community or of a particular group, it is best that we participate with them, we talk to them, we observe their everyday life in their natural settings, right? Therefore, it's our responsibility as researchers to immerse ourselves in their natural settings, in the field, right? To make it a little more clear, it's like if I want to know a little bit more about you, I can see Ashwati's camera on, right? Now, say, suppose if I want to understand more about Ashwati, one way is that, I can simply start asking questions to her here, right? I can, on this Zoom, among 100-odd participants, I can start asking her questions. Now, she'll be very cautious. She'll be very conscious as well, right? In terms of how she answers, what does she say, because there's so many people listening, so it alerts you. On the other hand, the other approach that I can take is that I will befriend her, right? And I'll say, I'll come to your place. I want to visit your place. I want to come to your home. And it's there that I will observe her. I'll see how she interacts with her family, her friends. And that would be closer to who she is, the real person that she is, right? Instead of asking her and learning about her more through this Zoom call or through this Google Meet, right? And that's exactly the difference in research as well. Now, naturally, this has changed. The tradition of fieldwork has, of course, shifted with, more specifically with the coming in of internet and social media. So now you also have very in-depth qualitative research that happens through social media, for instance, right? The second important feature of qualitative research is that generally we adopt a wide initial focus rather than testing narrowly defined hypotheses. Now, when qualitative research begins, it's usually very open-ended in the beginning. From the questions that we pursue to the methods that will follow, everything is usually very flexible and open-ended. And what we do is we go from a bird's eye view, from a larger perspective to a narrower worm's eye view. Now, what does that mean? It basically allows us to open ourselves to the field, right? We're giving the field the opportunity and the people in the field the opportunity to guide us in terms of what are relevant questions to ask, right? What are their concerns? What is worth researching, right? So we allow the field to guide us. Now, this is what grounded theory is about. Grounded theory approach is about that instead of having certain predetermined theories and hypotheses, already in hand to test in the field, I allow the field data to tell me or guide me in identifying issues and identifying categories and drawing conclusions, right? Now, so one approach is top-down, whereas qualitative approach is largely bottom-up, right? So we go from our data and then build theory, right? So we're funneling up. So grounded theory basically means I am grounded in my data. I'm grounded in my field. I am not testing theories. I am not building hypotheses from existing theories and then collecting data to see if that hypothesis is correct or not. But based on the data that I collect from my field, I will then build theories, right? The other aspect that's related to this is this idea of research being iterative inductive. Now, iterative basically means to repeat, right? And qualitative research, what usually happens is that, it's not a one-time process that I have a research question in my hand. I collect data, I analyze that data, I get some results, and I publish it and I go home. That's not how it works. Usually in qualitative research, it's a cyclical process, right? So I have questions in my mind. I, of course, collect data in my field. I will analyze the data or get some insight from that data, which leads to more questions, right? I again have to go back and collect further data, further analyze this, and this process goes on for some time, right? It's not just a one-time linear process, it's cyclical. This basically means that it's, iterative, that we're going basically round and round, it's cyclical. Now, a lot of time it feels like you're just going round and round and round. You're just beating around the bush. But if you can see, I've specifically put that picture there in order for us to understand this better, that you're not just going round and round and round, but you're in that process also traveling up, right? So from the beginning of your research till the end of your research, having done this iterative inductive process, while you're going round and round, while it's cyclical, you have traversed a distance. Your knowledge or your understanding of that place or of people, of that particular culture, whatever that you're studying, has significantly increased from the initial cycle, right? Now, the next important feature is that usually in qualitative research, we study one or small number of cases over lengthy period of time, right? So qualitative research takes time, right? For instance, in my PhD, I've done fieldwork for 3 years. A lot of people spend 10 years, maybe more. A lot of people spend their lifetime doing research in one area itself. So of course, it's over a very lengthy period of time. But most qualitative studies are micro studies. That means we study smaller number of cases, but less number of cases, but in greater detail, right? So you can have in qualitative research studies that are based on only, say, suppose one city, right? Or a small locality in one city, maybe one village or one group of, community, right? And if you want to see examples of this, maybe you can, after this session, Google on, so many village studies that have happened. People like M.N. Srinivas, a lot of them have actually worked on a single village. and their research is based on just one village, right? It's a micro study. You can also have examples in qualitative research where you studied a single person, right? That's it. Your sample has just one person. So I could do a life story of, say, suppose, an acid attack survivor, right? And that's just one life story that I want to do research on, and that's permissible. That's possible in qualitative research. That's how flexible qualitative research is. Now, related to this, because I talked about this idea of sampling, please remember that in qualitative research, we usually follow theoretical sampling. Now, what does theoretical sampling mean? And how is it different from statistical samples that we usually know about? Now, see, statistical samples are like, in, say, suppose a quantitative study, I say, I'm going to study 20% of the sample. I mean, 20% sample of the population, right? So I ensure that this 20% sample is representative. But once I've decided it's going to be 20%, it's fixed. I'm going to look at from this entire population, 20% only. Now, in theoretical sampling, that is not how it functions. Now, what happens in theoretical sampling is that my initial sample is decided based on my understanding of an area or of the people or of the particular issue that I'm trying to study. But as I do my fieldwork, it's possible that I realize that I've missed on some very important actors or very important stakeholders in my research. And therefore, to make my research more robust and more relevant and correct, I have to expand my samples. It's not fixed. Theoretical samples are never fixed. They're guided by your fieldwork. I'll give you an example. So my PhD is based on Kullu in Himachal, and I'm studying conservation-related issues. So, before going to my field, my sample that I had decided was that I'm going to talk to, of course, the forest department, but I will also speak to the local communities, maybe some NGOs and other line departments. This is broadly what I thought my sample would look like. It's only later, about 5-6 months into my PhD, that I realized that in Kullu and several hill states and areas in India, you would see that there is another category which is very important, which is very crucial to the social in these areas, which is usually in their terminology called as a Devta Samaj. So Kullu, and of course in a lot of places in Uttarakhand as well, are governed by local deities, by local gods and goddesses, right? And they determine a lot about people's lives, about the functioning and the governance of these areas. And this is something I didn't know before my, moving into my field. It's only after that I, went into my field, I realized that, okay, that these are people, or these is a particular group of stakeholders that I definitely have to speak to. So I expanded my sample. Similarly, just to give another example, say suppose I want to study homeless people, okay, and I want to understand how do homeless people navigate homelessness, right? How do they live without any place to call as their home? Now, my initial purpose of sample could include, of course, homeless people, right? It will also include, say, suppose, municipal shelters, police personnel. It can include NGOs that are working with homeless people. But it is possible that once I start my fieldwork, I realize that homeless people also rely on informal networks, right? So there could be a parking lot security guard of a mall nearby that allows people to sleep once the mall is shut, right? Or there could be these street food vendors that are benevolent and they give away whatever is left over from the day, right? Which are in these, all of these combined, make up an informal network of people who allow homeless people to probably survive, right? So for me, it then becomes important that I include these people in my sample, right? So that is what theoretical sample is. Now, the other aspect in qualitative research is that we employ a range of type of data, right? And methods. Now, data can be anything. For qualitative research, that's the beauty. A lot of things which otherwise may not seem like data and information we gladly welcome all of it, right? So it can be observation and your field notes. It can be interview and interview transcripts. It can be visual data, so videos or pictures or pamphlets, for instance. It can be audio data. So, for instance, I have relied in my fieldwork a lot on folk songs, right? It can be other textual data, such as say suppose some record that the community has kept of their ancestry or of their history. It could be newspapers, right? So Akhil Gupta has this very fascinating study on studying the state and corruption, and he does this study using vernacular newspapers, right? So that's another form of data. You could have archival data, you could have secondary information, you could have government records to rely on. And naturally, we also then have several different methods that we use in research, some of which we'll of course discuss subsequently in the next session. Now, I'm sure you would know by now that there is also minimal restructuring of data, right? It's a very open-ended, it's a very flexible format of data collection. And then finally, the reporting of qualitative data is also in form of verbal descriptions and explanations. So when we write qualitative reports or theses, it is what is called as thick description, right? Now, thick description basically means that in qualitative research, you won't find as many graphs or numbers or tables, right? Very often, ethnographic studies, rich qualitative studies will have verbal descriptions like stories, rigorous, but in the form of stories, right? Which are full of minute details about the people, about events, about every aspect of life, right? And also, you will see in qualitative research, for those who might be interested in writing reports now, we also tend to directly quote from conversations, right? So if I've had a conversation with somebody, I can actually pick up a portion of that conversation and directly quote in my study and then analyze that, right? Okay, so I hope you're with me till here.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right.
Yes.
Okay. All right, lovely. Okay, I'll move to the next section, and we are nearing the end of the session, but of course we have a couple of slides. Okay, now see, when you do qualitative research, please also remember in qualitative research, of course, methods are important, right? But more important is the researcher themselves, right? So qualitative research is really dependent on you and the skills that you have, or the skills that you develop and inculcate as a researcher as you go about your research. And therefore, there are these range of life skills that a person should have or should develop, try to develop when you're doing research. The first is personal time management. Now, that basically means it's important that you catch the rhythm of the field, right? Now, to give you an example, if I am going to a remote village in Kullu and doing my research, right? And I have a tendency that I wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning, okay, or maybe 9, I don't know, right? But the people in this village, they wake up at 4 o'clock. They have their chai and they straight rush to their agricultural fields. They do their, cultivation, whatever, get grass for their animals, and then they come back. So by the time I wake up, half their day is already over, right? Now, if I do not align my timeline with theirs, there is a significant portion of their life that I'm missing on. There's a significant portion of information that I will not be able to capture, right? So while it's tough, but qualitative research requires that, we align our rhythms with the rhythm of the field and the people in the field. That's the first important aspect, that you should be able to manage your time. The second aspect is about organizational skills to collect data. That means as researchers, you ought to know and have the sensitivity and the knowledge about what to ask, to whom you have to ask, when do you ask, and how do you ask. Right? These are very crucial questions. It just doesn't happen randomly. Now, this is something we will delve into when we do participant observation and interviews subsequently, but I thought I should mention it here. Now, the next other life skill that's important is to be able to communicate with people. A lot of us shy away from conversations. A lot of us have inhibitions in terms of speaking to people. That is something we need to overcome. We need to get over our inhibitions to talk to people. We, as researchers, it's must, specifically in qualitative research, they should be able to strike a conversation. Right? You should be able to talk to people. You should be able to listen to people. You should be able to share with people. Right? You should be open-minded as well. A lot of times in research, you hear and people say things which you may not personally agree with. You need to have an open mind and embrace it as researchers. Instead of passing moral judgments, we need to be open-minded in terms of accepting what people are saying. Right? The next important skill is that it's important that we learn to observe patterns. Right? And observation never comes naturally. Okay, some of us may be blessed with good observational skills, but for most of us, it doesn't come naturally, and it has to be systematically inculcated. So just because I'm looking at, an event, a meeting, etc., doesn't mean I'm observing. Possible that I'm just seeing and I'm not observing anything, right? The next important skill is curiosity. Naturally, for any research, more so for qualitative research, you have to be inquisitive. You need to ask questions. You need to be willing to learn. You need to be willing to push your boundaries, right? It's only when you move out of your comfort zone, it's only when you are curious to learn about things that you don't know, will you be able to do good qualitative research, right? And lastly, we also need to be reflexive, right? Which is to say that we need to understand how we impact the field. How do we as researchers, how does our presence in the field impact us? All in all, if you look at qualitative research, having spent some time now doing qualitative research, I can very confidently say that, somebody who's done qualitative research, it's transformational. You're not just doing research. As a person, this is a method that changes you, it develops you, it helps you mature yourself, it helps you grow, right? Even at a personal level. That's the level of learning that happens. Now, quickly to the next section, which is something I think is important to address, because, a lot of people learn about qualitative research and then they have these questions in mind which are unresolved. I am hoping that with this, some of those questions can be addressed, right? Now, there are a couple of issues in qualitative research, and this is, of course, not an exhaustive list, but a couple of important issues in qualitative research which come up very often, right? The first issue that is usually raised is that of subjectivity, right? So, up till now in the presentation, I've spoken a lot about the idea that qualitative research is about people's perspective, it's about their experiences, it's about their viewpoint, the meanings that they attach, their interpretations, right? And because it is so, the biggest criticism that is levied against qualitative research is it's very subjective, right? And therefore, it's not generalizable, right? Or it's not reliable. Now, points that I feel are important here. One, when we talk of subjectivity, all research is subjective. Even hardcore natural science is subjective, right? And why do I say? Because even the most supposedly objective studies, it's the researcher who's deciding what to study, when to study, how to study, right? Now that in itself is a bias. That in itself is subjectivity, because it's me who's deciding what has to be done, right? Now, by that logic, there is no research which is neutral, okay? And also remember that, every research comes up in certain contexts. For example, why do we suddenly have so much focus on climate change? Why suddenly? Of course, one point is that, it is a very imminent issue, right? We are facing a crisis, of course, yes. But there are other factors also that drive research. Like, what do you think drives research? Any
Curiosity.
Sorry?
Curiosity.
Okay, all right. Yes, of course. But see, there are here as well larger forces in operation. And I think somebody's already mentioned funding. You stop funding for climate studies. Proportionately, the number of research on climate science or climate studies or climate change will drastically fell down. Because for research, you need logistics. You need money, right? So funding is another aspect. Now, who funds you? Where is this money coming from? All of this, we might not realize it, but all of this tends to bias our research, right? Our research does become technocratic. We become answerable to our funding agencies. Feasibility you've mentioned. Yes, all of these are aspects that determine, which research is going to be done, right? And if you look at climate studies today, there is an entire geopolitics revolving around climate studies, right? And a lot of international organizations, a lot of governments today have this is a very important geopolitical tool for negotiation, and therefore that much more focus on climate studies research. You might not probably find funding for some other research, right? You can probably think of certain topics that are probably not gaining as much traction these days, or the funding for which has probably reduced, right? Now that's one aspect. Therefore, there is no research which is not subjective. There is no research which is not neutral. Every research is subjective, right? The second question with respect to subjectivity is, what are we trying to generalize, right? What is it that we are trying to be objective about? Now, in qualitative research, we never claim that we generalize our results to the entire population. That is never a claim, right? That is never the purpose also. But nevertheless, we generalize. And what do we generalize to? We generalize our from our study, the results that we get. These can be generalized to the questions or issues that we have been working with, right? So, to give you a quick example of that, for instance, if I do a study on domestic violence, example, right, or anything else. Now, I might take only a couple of interviews. I might take 10 in-depth interviews of women, say, in Mumbai, right? And publish my report. Now, I will never claim that what is happening to these 10 women is something that can be extrapolated to the entire population. However, my results do contribute to the issue of understanding domestic violence. And therefore, in that sense, qualitative research is generalizable. Right? I can generalize to my question, not to the population, right? So when you talk of subjectivity, from my point of view, it's never an issue, because every research is subjective, right? In fact, the only way to be objective is, or only way of being true to your research is by being more subjective, okay? Now, the second important aspect is of reactivity. Reactivity basically means two things. One, as I said, my presence as researcher on the field impacts how people respond to me. It will alter their behavior, right? People might have to put up a show, perform, be performative in terms of, how they behave, how they interact, etc. Now, as researchers, we need to be aware of this impact that we have on people in the field, right? And it is always suggested, no. It's not, no. So we can come discuss of positionality later. Positionality is more in terms of where I'm coming from. That would be more in terms of, say, suppose representation of subjectivity. But reactivity is basically how do people react to my presence, right? What changes does it bring in, right? As I said, if I start asking you questions here about you, it will be reactive. You will be reacting to my presence. You will be reacting to the presence of 100 odd other people focusing on you, right? So what that basically means that one, of course, we need to be aware of this impact that we have, and it's always in that context suggested that you must strive to become invisible in your field. Now, what does invisible mean? It doesn't mean that you actually go invisible. What it means is that you develop that level of familiarity, right? Or people and you should develop that level of familiarity that you become a non-entity. That people don't care if you're there or not. They're just going to live their life, right? That level of intimacy needs to be developed in order to overcome this issue. The second issue of reactivity is that it's not just that my presence impacts the people in the field also impact me. So in research, there will always be these stages of frustration, of feeling low, right? There will always be issues of biases or prejudices that I hold about people or about particular areas, right? All of these biases, all of these prejudices of how I'm reacting to the field need to be recorded. Say in a personal diary, I might want to record it. And these should be mentioned in your research, right? In a reflective note section, maybe in your research, you should definitely mention all of these because that gives more validity to your research. That makes your research more true, right? So with respect to reactivity, you need to reflect on what you do to others and how others impact you. The third major issue is of ethics, and Professor Gupta did mention in the beginning about ethics. Now, see, where does this issue of ethics comes up? And it comes up in any form of research, right? It comes up in social science research because you're entering people's lives. You're asking them questions which are very intimate. You're entering their intimate space. You're living with them probably in their, homes. Now, my research, because I've crossed that boundary, will have far-reaching implications on people's lives, right? And therefore, ethics becomes a very, very crucial issue in research, specifically in social research, right? And this is a question that comes up at every stage of research, right? So in writing, we often say that you have to be ethical, therefore you should maintain anonymity and confidentiality. Don't reveal the name of the participants. Use pseudonyms, right? In data collection, for ethics, you would have heard people tell you that free prior informed consent is important. You need to be true and tell people what your research is about, what are you going to do with this data, how are you going to use this data later. All of these aspects should be informed to people, and only if they agree should you go ahead. But more broadly, if you look at the question of ethics, it's really about developing sensitivity, right? And what that means is, you must be aware of the impact that you can have or your research can have in terms of studying a particular group. Say, suppose if I'm doing a study of gang culture, underworld, suppose, right? Now, my research and my findings, there is a possibility that if I do not practice confidentiality, if I don't practice ethical practices, there is a possibility that I will expose a lot of things which people have told me in great trust, right? Jeopardizing their security, jeopardizing their safety, right? The other aspect is also to be sensitive in the sense we must know how to ask questions, right? You cannot ask a question in the same way to a child as you would to an adult, right? Similarly, for very sensitive topics, right? How you ask, how you frame your questions, that's a skill that we need to master, right? It is also important as researchers to know if you have to stop a research, right? So suppose if I'm studying victims of abuse, okay, or people who are going through mental health issues, or if I'm studying people who've been victims of riots. In all of these cases, please remember your questions, your research can trigger trauma, right? And that's something that you shouldn't be doing, right? So just for the sake of your research, you shouldn't keep going if you feel that it is problematic. If somebody is being uncomfortable or you feel you're crossing a boundary, please have you have to take that stand and say that, okay, I'm not going to go forward with this research. I have to stop this research here because it's crossing ethical boundaries, right? Now, However, while we know all of this, there is no ready answer for what is ethical and what is not ethical, right? It's really very context specific. It depends on you. It depends on how you perceive a particular situation. So it's case to case, right? I'll give you an example. I don't know how many of you know of this photographer, what is his name? Kevin Carter, who also won the Pulitzer Award for a particular photograph. I don't know how many of you are aware of that photograph. Okay, or some of you are. All right. So basically, what? Yes, the vulture and the child. Now, what this person did, I think it was in Sudan, and he's a journalist, and he was a journalist, and he clicked this picture of this little child, little girl child. You can actually see like the entire skeleton of this child, and she's just lying on the out in a field basically, and it's completely malnourished. Okay, it's almost about to die like that. And right at the back of this, there is this vulture. And the picture, what it really captures and what it basically says, it's almost as if this vulture is waiting for this child to die so that the vulture can feed on it. Now, he clicked this picture, and then for several reasons, he left the place. He published this picture. It became so famous that he also won an award. But he also faced a lot of backlash. And a backlash was like very simple question that might come to our minds as well, that you should have simply saved that child from the vulture. Why didn't you do anything? Was clicking a picture and walking away more important for you as a journalist, or helping a child in such distress required you to step in and do something? That's an ethical question. And we can have our different answers. Unfortunately, because of that backlash, this person actually committed suicide later because of the depression that he went through, realizing what was happening, right? So that's why I say that ethics is something that's very context specific. There is no answer of right and wrong here. Now, moving to the next point, that is of representation. Now, what does that mean? Now, this is a question which basically says who can do research on who, right? So can I, as a woman, am I only eligible and more in a position to do research on women's issues, or can men also do it, right? Can they be equally good as researchers trying to understand women's issues? Again, no one answer. Different people can have different views. A lot of people may say that no, only women can do research or should do research on women's issues, whereas a lot of others may take a different stance. I personally feel that research is really about trying to move beyond divides, and of course, these are difficult boundaries to cross. But the ultimate purpose of research is also to be able to move beyond these rigid divides that we have, right? And therefore, at least in research, we should strive for a situation where everyone should be able to do research on everyone else, right? In fact, a lot of people would also give you an argument that when somebody who's a non-native does research on a particular group, they also lead to better insights because they're not biased by their own communities, practices, structures, etc. So representation is again another issue. Another aspect is of going native, and I'll discuss this in more detail tomorrow, but going native is very common in qualitative research, which basically means that, sometimes we get so immersed in our field work, we get so, attached to our field and the people in the field and the culture that we are trying to study, that we become a part and parcel of it. We just get flown away with it, right? And that's called going native. We become the native that we are studying, right? What that unfortunately does is that it, as a researcher, we lose our analytical ability, right? And that's a problem. A classic example of going native is Kenneth Good. You can read about Kenneth Good. Now, Kenneth Good was trying to study the Yanomami tribe in the Amazons. And he was so, taken by the Yanomami culture that he gave up his identity of a researcher. He married into Yanomami tribe, married a girl there, had children, became a part of her tribe, right? So this is another aspect that must be taken care of. The last part here is the issue of access. How do you gain entry into your field, right? Now, entry into field isn't easy, right? In any case, wherever you're doing your research, it's not an easy task, right? It needs patience. It also needs very high level of rapport building. But more importantly, the issue of access basically means as researchers, we should be able to navigate gatekeepers. What are gatekeepers? Now, gatekeepers are basically, it's a term used for people in a particular setting who are influential, who are basically standing on the gate like guards, right? Uh, without whom you cannot actually, without passing them, without their permission, you cannot actually enter that gate. This thing is an example. If I'm going to do a study in a village, maybe the sarpanch, the village head, is a gatekeeper. Now the problem is that there could be vested interests in these gatekeepers to present a beautiful rosy picture of the place that you're studying, right? My task as a researcher is to be able to navigate these gatekeepers and move in to my field. And once I've done that, it's at that point of time that my research actually begins, once I've crossed the gatekeepers. These are some broad issues in qualitative research that need to be kept in mind. The last slide here, and then we can take up some questions, is, there are, as I said, several different methods that we use in qualitative research. Some of these we will focus on tomorrow and then in the next lecture as well. But broadly, some of the most basic methods in qualitative research are that of in-depth interviews, focus groups, observation, case studies. But in case study, of course, you use a mix of so many other methods. And then, of course, a lot of qualitative research doesn't focus on only one method. It has multiple methods, and it has an eclectic mix of methods for the purpose of doing research. Now, we'll do some of these methods subsequently in the next sessions that we'll have. But I will stop my PPT here, and I would like to hear from all of you, right? If there are questions, if there's feedback, if there are comments, if there's something that you feel I should address in the next section as well, please let me know. Okay, share the slides. Okay. All right. So Saraswati here has a question. Yes, please.
I hope I'm audible. First of all, thank you for this session. Actually, I'm hoping that maybe you would be able to answer this in the upcoming session where we talk about interviews. So,
Okay.
like, at times, suppose if I give an example, like we are trying to understand the challenges that women face in a particular place, and for them, probably the challenges are so normalized that it is very hard to like get from them that what is challenging or what would make their life easier, because the answers are probably like they don't find it challenging because it is the way that they live even with those challenges is pretty normalized. So how do you like nudging them with some responses that you would want wouldn't be the right way, right? So how do you actually like probe more into it and like understand it? I hope the question is clear. Thank you.
Right. See, yes, I'll try to address this when we do interviews, Saraswati. But a very short and quick answer here would be the fact. Unfortunately, what happens with a lot of us, right, in research is that we have these very set ideas about the world, right? We feel that this is how the world is and this is how it's supposed to operate. So when we hear people say that it is not challenging for them, it's difficult for us as researchers to accept it, right? It's difficult to accept a point of view which does not align with the way that probably I've read about in my literature, or probably of how I approach these issues. So the truest answer for such a thing is basically, as I said, we need to be open-minded in order to be able to accept what people say, even if it doesn't align with what I think the way should be. But as far as in terms of getting information, there is a possibility that you might ask people, say suppose women, about their issues, and they may be hesitant in terms of answering. That's a separate issue. How do you go about dealing with those issues? I will try to bring that in as well. But see, because you're asking about them, asking them about their issues, which again, as I said, are very intimate questions, very sensitive questions. People will not readily talk about these issues. These questions can be addressed only when you've developed a level of intimacy, only when you've developed that level of rapport with people, such that they feel that they can share their life and their issues with you, right? That takes time. That takes familiarity, that takes a lot of patience on part of you as a researcher first to establish that level of rapport. I hope that answers, but yes, I'll try to bring in more aspects related to this tomorrow. Yeah? Okay. All right. Okay, so here I see Archana also has a question.
Yeah, Aditi, thank you for that thought-provoking presentation. So it strikes me that, it sort of follows from, I think, what Saraswati said. So how do we sort of reconcile the fact that a researcher and her participants might have different worldviews, right? Now, I also work on conservation-related issues with communities, right? And as a researcher, I go in with quite a different understanding of conservation at different scales, etc., global connotations. The participants I'm speaking to have a very different understanding of conservation. It might not even be conservation. I don't know if they might even subscribe if they were to ask me to define what conservation was, from where I was coming from. They might not even think that we are talking about the same thing, right? I mean, for them, it might be a different relationship with the natural environment, with their ancestors, a very different ballgame. They might not care at all that what they are saying could affect someone 3 continents away, etc. But I'm going to locate what they are saying in that context. So how does one sort of reconcile?
Right. So a very valid question. In fact, what you're saying is something that I've also personally experienced several times in my research. In fact, when I was doing my MPhil research, I remember having read these theories and a lot about, tribes and Adivasi people. I went with this perspective about them as being, having a very harmonious relationship with forests, for instance, which of course is true for a lot of communities still. But then I went and I kept for 3 days straight. I kept asking, the forest department, saying that, how can you rehabilitate them? How can you, you're basically breaking down a very, harmonious relationship, or a relationship that these people share with the forest, for instance, right? And I kept harping on this, and after 3 days, this person answers, that what you're saying may be true, but at least in this particular case, it is not, right? So what unfortunately happens is that sometimes we let things such as theories, or things that we've read, overpower our understanding of field, and we fixate our lenses of viewing things in the field and then approach it. So everything that we're looking in the field, or we are observing in the field, has to fit within the box that I've already created. Now, the only way to reconcile with such a situation is to really shed these preconceived notions that we have about, say, suppose conservation, right? Of what conservation means. And to be able to accept newer ideas, newer epistemologies of how people understand about their life worlds, be accepting of that, because from how I see it, that's where research happens. That's where newer information, newer knowledge develops. To my mind, so it's really about trying to shed our this idea that with which we usually go to field. to be very, very receptive, very, very open. In fact, one of my teachers once told me that, the best way of going and doing qualitative research or very strong ethnographic studies is don't ask questions. Just don't do anything in the field. Just be there, just let people come to you, let people judge you first, let people formulate an idea about you, let them come and ask questions to you. And it's in those conversations that ultimately you will start finding answers to your questions. But if you start asking questions, there is always a tendency that we have these categories and conceptions with which we usually approach. So the best way is basically to be as open-minded, as welcoming about perspectives and ideas that we don't know about or we don't subscribe to.
Thanks.
I hope that helps.
It does. Thanks.
All right, anybody else?
Ma'am, we have a question in the conversation box.
Okay. Okay, so it says, what are the best practices for managing qualitative research in local languages when researcher lacks fluency? Specifically, how can we ensure data integrity while working through interpreters? Oh, interesting. Okay. See, now it again circles back to some of the issues that we raised. And when you don't know the language, naturally you would have to fall back on interpreters, right? And when you do so, please remember, as I said, no two qualitative research will ever be same, right? So even if you're studying the same group of people, even if you're studying, you have the same questions, even if you're using same methodologies, your results will never be the same. And that's what makes qualitative research so unique, right? And that is what basically subjectivity is, that it's basically your interactions, who you happen to meet. A lot of it is also on matter of chance in terms of whether you meet the right kind of people or not. So but to say that that's not reliable is wrong. As I said, reliability, the question of reliability usually comes up in context of generalization, right? And I said we're never claiming to generalize to an entire population. Our claim is only that we as researchers, having done this research, are able to add to existing knowledge about a particular issue. We never say that we're generalizing to populations, right? Now, because you talked of interpreters, I want to quickly bring in this example, and maybe you should go and read about this particular work. It's by Gerald Berryman, and he happened to do his study in a village in Uttarakhand, right? And he mentions this very interesting case of how interpreters and the people that you meet determine so much about your research. So in the initial phase of his research, he of course didn't know the language, and therefore he relied on interpreters. So the first interpreter that he had was this very God-fearing Hindu, and so he would usually take Berryman around, meet people interact. Berryman collected data, whatever, and the research was going on until one day when this interpreter fell ill and he never turned up. Now Berryman was of course very anxious, and he didn't know what to do because it just was a dead end for him. He couldn't move forward. So then he, after some days, happens to find another interpreter who, in this case happened to be a person who was a Muslim, right? And Berryman said, okay, tomorrow morning we'll again, initiate our research, and we'll start going to these households and start talking to people. And he said, no, we will not do it this way. You wait till evening, and in the evening we'll go to this so-called club nearby. And it's not a club in a village per se, but something akin to that. And we'll do our research there. And Berryman was really taken. I was like, what am I going to do there? I'm not going to drink. What am I supposed to do there? And when he finally did follow what this second interpreter said, it unfolded a different world to Berryman, right? So because when people were there having these very informal conversations after a tiring day, the level of intimacy probably that developed at this place was very different, right? So two interpreters, two very different stories of the same place by the same researcher, right? That is a part of qualitative research. Now, I will not say that it's not reliable, because I'm not trying to generalize. I hope that helps. I hope that answers your questions. All right. Anybody else? If there's, even feedback or comments that you'd want to give, I'll be very happy to listen from you.
Ma'am, we have got another question in the text box.
Okay, where is it?
Briefly repeat issues of qualitative research reactivity. Actually,
See, reactivity is basically, reactivity is essentially to say that, as I said, no research is objective, right? So and it's not about research in general, when you speak to somebody, you tend to get affected by how this person is. So if you happen to meet a person who's very friendly, very chill, so you develop immediate bonding, right? Whereas your presence, or how you get impacted by somebody who's very formidable, for instance, it brings out a different personality. Now, that's what reactivity is. Reactivity essentially means that because I am there in the field, people know that I am looking at them. People know that I'm observing them. So there is a possibility that they will alter their behavior, that they will not be their true selves. Okay, that they will try to put up a performance because there is an outsider who's there. I'm in somebody's home, so people would always want to ensure that the inner details and the issues in the house don't come out. So there's always that aspect where people will judge you as a researcher. Why are you here? What do you want to know? Right? Why are you doing this research? What will you do with this information that you've collected me? How is that going to portray me as a person? And that is what reactivity is. That will determine how I answer your questions, right? Now, for me as a researcher, I have to get past that. I have to be in a position where I'm able to talk to the real person in front of me, right? Who's not inhibited, who's talking freely to me. And that's where I said that you need to develop rapport. You need to develop familiarity such that people are comfortable around you. Okay, they're free to talk about issues without the fear of being misquoted, without the fear of being judged, without being impacted by your presence. That's one part of reactivity. The second part of reactivity is that you also get impacted by people, right? If somebody is not responding to you straight for 10 days in your research, you might feel like, oh my God, what am I going to do? You'll feel frustrated, right? You might feel depressed. You might feel like, I'm never going to be able to do this research. Or you might, the way people talk to you, you might form certain opinions about these people, okay? That, whatever, that this person is not good or some aspects about them. Now, all of those aspects should be noted down. You should not consider all of this as peripheral issues. Usually we consider everything that's happening to us as personal issues, and that should not be produced in research. Research is very sanitized. The theses are very sanitized. Don't do it. Please be open. Please share your hesitations in your research. Talk about, your point of views, what you went through, right? I hope that helps. If there's anything else.
Quick questions, ma'am. First is,
okay.
What was the book you mentioned about interpretation?
Book. Interpretation. So the one that I mentioned right now, it's called Berryman. I can share the link with you here. Wait. Okay, but what is the next question?
It's like a question by Archana. When an insider does research, does that enhance the quality of research?
Sorry, can you come again?
When an insider does a research, will it enhance the quality?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Because as I said, sometimes when you're studying your own people, you are also biased. So a lot of things about studying your own culture, you might not even question them, right? So not necessarily. You might have more access. It might be easier for you to do research. You might be able to contact people more easily, talk to them more freely, but that doesn't mean that your research will be superior. It can be more biased as well. Okay. So I've mentioned the name of this anthropologist. His name is Gerald Berryman. You might want to look at his works. Anything else? Anybody has a question? Okay. So if not, I hope the lecture was useful. All right. So tomorrow I'm thinking we would do a little bit about participant observation in interviews, because they're the most standard methods in qualitative research. Of course, qualitative is like an entire ocean of research methods, but we'll begin with the most basic, given the diversity of the group as well. Right?